The meeting took about another 2.5 hours from the time I entered. It was entirely focused on whether there should be a DOJ leadership change. I was sitting directly in front of the president. Jeff Rosen was to my right, Jeff Clark was to my left. He looked at me and he underscored, well, the one thing we know is you're not going to do anything. You don't even agree that the concerns that are being presented are valid. And here's someone who has a different view. So well, why shouldn't I do that? You know, that's how the discussion then proceeded.
Jeff Clark was proposing that Jeff Rosen be replaced by Jeff Clark. And I thought the proposal was asinine. I did not think Jeff Clark remotely was qualified to become Attorney General.
What were Clark's purported bases for why it was in the president's interest for him to step in? What would he do? How would things change, according to Mr. Clark in the meeting?
He repeatedly said to the president that if he was put in the seat, he would conduct real investigations that would, in his view, uncover widespread fraud. He would send out the letter that he had drafted, and he had the intelligence and the will and the desire to pursue these matters in the way that the president thought most appropriate.
And I thought this was like his lifelong dream to have this opportunity. And he was making a pitch, and every time he'd get clobbered over the head, he would say, like a call to order, the president's your decision. You get the chance to make this decision. And, you've heard everybody and you can make your determination. And then we jump back in and, really clobber him.
As was raised with the president, and as he ultimately agreed, the letter would not have, nobody would have cared what Jeff Clark signed his name to, right? Because the story would have been, that the president had gone through two attorneys general in 2 weeks until he found the environmental guy to say what he wanted to say.
I made the point that Jeff Clark is not even competent to serve as the attorney general. He's never been a criminal attorney. He's never conducted a criminal investigation in his life. He's never been in front of a grand jury, much less a trial jury. And he kind of retorted by saying, well, I've done a lot of very complicated appeals and civil litigation, environmental litigation, and things like that. And I said, that's right, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill? And so it got very confrontational at points.
And at one point, I remember saying, wait, let me walk through, Jeff, what you want to do. And I cross-examined him in front of the president as to what his strategy was. And when he finished discussing what he planned on doing, I said, good effing a-hole. Congratulations, you just admitted a first step or act you take as Attorney General would be committing a felony and violating Rule 6C. You're clearly the right candidate for this job. Right, and it was clear, and everybody was on his case. The guy had never been before a grand jury, let alone having any idea how a criminal case would be prosecuted.
And Pat Cipollone weighed in at one point, I remember saying, that letter that this guy wants to send, that letter is a murder-suicide pact. It's going to damage everyone who touches it. And we should have nothing to do with that letter. I don't ever want to see that letter again. And so we went along those lines.
I thought Clark's proposal was nuts. As the guy said at a certain point, listen, the best I can tell is the only thing you know about environmental and elections challenges is they both start with E. And based on your answer tonight, I'm not even certain you know that.
The president said, suppose I do this. Suppose I replace him, Jeff Rosen, with him, Jeff Clark. What do you do? And I said, sir, I would resign immediately. There is no way I'm serving 1 minute under this guy, Jeff Clark. And then the president turned to Steve Engel and he said, Steve, you wouldn't resign, would you? And Steve said, absolutely I would, Mr. President. You leave me no choice. And I said, and we're not the only ones. You should understand that your entire department leadership will resign. Every AAG will resign. I didn't tell him about the call or anything, but I made it clear that I knew what they were going to do. And I said, Mr. President, these aren't bureaucratic leftovers from another administration. You picked them. This is your leadership team. You sent every one of them to the Senate. You got them confirmed. What is that going to say about you when we all walk out at the same time? And I don't even know what that's going to do to the U.S. attorney community. You could have mass resignations amongst your U.S. attorneys, and then it will trickle down from there. You could have resignations across the department. And what happens if within 48 hours we have hundreds of resignations from your Justice Department because of your actions? What does that say about your leadership?
I said, well, Mr. President, I've been with you through 4 attorneys general, including 2 acting attorneys general, and I just couldn't be part of this if Mr. Clark were here. And I said, and I believe that the other senior department officials would resign as well, and Mr. Clark would be here, by himself, with a hostile building, of those folks who remained, and, nothing would get done.
And I think Pat Cipollone said, well, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to be here if this happens either.
I felt strongly then, now I think this is about all of government, that the people who serve the public should be doing their utmost best to do the right things for the right reasons, to take very seriously their honoring of their obligations under the Constitution and their fidelity to the rule of law. I felt that the people that I was working with one exception, had the same perspective.